This is War Room Moments, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and most relevant people on the planet, hear their stories, and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. War Room Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board. Here's your host, Jason Miller.
All right. Hey, welcome to the War Room. John, how are you feeling, brother?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, God, it's a balmy 24 degrees in Boulder, Colorado today. But hey, like I always tell people, if we got oxygen coming in and out of our chest, that's a great day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So great to have you on the show today. And I always kind of like to kick things off a little bit with, your journey. So your journey, did you grow up in a family of entrepreneurs or business people, or what did that look? What was your journey like for you?
Sure. So I grew up just north of New York City, in a small town called Armonk. That's where IBM's corporate headquarters is. And my dad was a IBM employee the entire time I was growing up. I think he retired with 35 years of service. And so being a corporate employee and, being a son that looks up to his dad and wanting to be just like his dad, when I graduated from college, I went to go work for a large corporation. I went to go work for Sprint. And worked for Sprint for almost 9 years. Took a hiatus to go try the startup thing in 2000, and then went back to Sprint after that. That went down. While I was at Sprint, I realized that the corporate life just wasn't really for me. Sprint treated me incredibly well. My dad supported our family really well in the corporate life. But it just wasn't a place that I wanted to spend, 30 years of my life. So I did a lot of research on different careers. And when I had an idea of a career that I thought might fit me, I would ask people that knew me well and get their feedback. And I knew I was onto something when I decided to become a financial advisor, because people that knew me well, when I asked them if they could see me doing that as a career, building a financial planning business, I started hearing, not only could I see you doing it, but if you do choose to do that, call me, because I want to work with you. I want you to be the one to handle my stuff. And so that's when I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then that was 20 years ago, just this past December.
Wow.
I've been doing this.
Good. Awesome. Yeah. So you've been in the fight for a while then.
Yeah, I have.
You got all the bloody noses and bloody t-shirts, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But hey, that's all part of the learning process, right? Is, getting all those bloody noses along the way. And that's been a big part of this podcast, was to try to prevent that for some young founders.
No, absolutely.
How did, I guess, like growing up and stuff, because a lot of times entrepreneurship, it's like in our blood somehow, right?
Right.
I grew up when my family was very entrepreneurial. And when did you really like feel that bug caught you? When did that happen for you?
Well, initially it happened when I was a kid. I really was an independent child and really just kind of wanted to do my own thing. And I learned very quickly that if you have money, then you have more choices. And also, if you've got to ask mom and dad for money, that usually comes with a lot of questions. Whereas if I had my own money, it's like, yeah, I'm going off the Paul, see you. And they're like, yeah, whatever, just let us know when you'll be back. Then I could just go off and, I didn't get the questions that I didn't really want to answer. So that's early on. And then the gentleman that I lived right next door to me, he had his own business, and I was just fascinated by that. And so I don't know how I did this or why I did this, but one day I approached him. I said, hey, I should work in your business. I'm 15 years old. and he was a real estate consultant. And he's like, okay, well, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I'm pretty good with computers. So you should hire me to deal with all your computers. He's like, all right, okay. So for 2 days a week that summer, I worked with him in his business. And I really got to see what it was like for a small business owner. And I worked for a number of other small businesses along the way, but that was really the start, seeing that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and it's good that you get exposed to that like when you're younger, because then you realize that there's a lot of not sexy parts about it, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And everybody just sees the glitz and glam part, but what nobody gets to see is when you slide that curtain open, what that hot mess looks like sometimes back there.
Oh, without question. And one of the gentlemen that I worked for along the way, he owned a liquor store. Great guy. It was a family-run business. A great guy. And so one day I pulled him aside and I was asking him a couple of questions about it. And he looked at me a little bit horrified. He was like, do you want to open up a liquor store? I was like, well, I don't know, maybe. I want to know how this works. He's like, yeah, no, you don't want to do that. I think he was just having a bad day. That liquor store is still in business, and his kids have now, he took it over from his dad. He ran it. Now his kids are running it.
Nice.
So I just wanted to share that as perspective. He didn't hate the job.
Yeah. Well, that's typically when you see a business run generationally, it's probably doing pretty good.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, COVID helped alcohol too.
Hey, times are bad, people drink. Times are good, people drink more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was reading something about alcohol sales during COVID, and they said there was more alcoholics created during COVID than any other time in history.
Oh,
I mean,
that's awful.
But think about it. People were drinking more.
No, it makes sense.
It makes total sense. You're stuck at house and your house, and you start drinking a little bit of wine. The next thing, another one. Next thing, you got a bottle down in a day, right?
Right.
Next thing, it's 2 bottles, and it's 3, 4, 5, and then your liver falls out your butthole. Right. So, I think me growing up as a kid, I mean, I got some great lessons from my folks when it came, what to do and what not to do, probably more importantly. Because my mom always flared to like the trend at the time, right? So she owned I grew up in a really small town of like, I don't know, would have been 500 or less.
Oh, wow.
So she owned pretty much everything in town, pretty much. But, a restaurant, a clothing store, and then back then was, so it went from VHS tape rentals to DVD rentals to out of business, basically. And, I remember my dad, because he was a farmer, right? And every year he'd go to the banker and do his thing with the banker,
right?
And the days of the P&L were much different then, right? So he had one of those red notebooks, and he would literally, his P&L was handwritten inside of a notebook, right? And but that's like some of the first times I learned how to not manage money, but how to push money around, right? When things got bad, how did he rob Peter to pay Paul? All these different things, right? And there was some valuable lessons in that. And the biggest valuable lesson for me was not to have to do that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I'm really curious. I mean, you've been in business for a lot of years, so I'm curious to know, what are some of your top go-to tips if you would reach into your bucket of sludge and say, look, here's 3 lessons that I learned over the last 20 years in my business. And here's kind of some of the tips to get around some of that.
Sure. So when I decided to become a financial advisor, I was really thinking that a lot of my time was going to be in the world of investments. And I do spend quite a bit of time there, but I thought that was pretty much, going to be 90% of my time. And the firm that I got hired by, when I was looking for a place to work, I would ask it during the interview. I'd always ask the same question, like, so people come in, they give you all their financial information, and you do what with it? Like, because you're going to give them advice. What's the advice based on? And I really didn't get very good answers. A lot of places, I was just hearing a lot of sales. Like, well, they come in with their mutual funds, we show them our mutual funds. They come in with their insurance, we show them our insurance. And that didn't sound like a financial plan to me. With the firm that I ultimately landed with, they counter with like, oh, well, we have this great process called Living Balance Sheet, and instead of telling you about it, we'll do your financial plan for free, and if you like it, then maybe you want to come work here. And so that's how I started my journey with the firm that I'm with.
All right.
So the reason I started with that matter of background is that I didn't know anything about the world of insurance, nothing. And so very quickly they taught me about how to structure your property and casualty insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, umbrella insurance, things like disability insurance, which I wasn't really aware of. Being in my early 30s and thinking I was invincible, and then life insurance. So they trained me, and I started working with families. And then I started, working on my own after my year of training. Very first client I worked with, onboarded them. The husband bought $2 million of life insurance to protect his income. His wife was uninsurable. She had some medical issues. And we made arrangements to get together in 6 months to talk about investing. And I was all excited. I had landed my first client. About 4 months later, it's a hot August day. I'm mowing the lawn. It's a Sunday. I get back into the house. I answer I had a voicemail, and it's my buddy Kevin. And he says, I don't know how to tell you this, but your friend Nate died this morning. Nate being the guy that got the $2 million of life insurance. So very quickly, all of my work was on display, and I watched this policy turn into a checking account and what it meant to that family. To get full circle back to the question you asked, the three things that I would encourage people, like, these are things you should focus on. Number one is, figure out, or at least know what is your human life value worth? Like, what is the net present value of all your future paychecks? And then map that against, what protections you have in place, and just, are you happy with the result? I'm not making a recommendation here. I'm just saying, like, you should know, where the bookends are. The second thing is the cash flow management. Cash flow management is the dominant determinant of financial success or failure for most families in America. The median income in the United States is $70,000 a year. The median net worth of people between the ages of 55 and 64, people that are approaching retirement, is $215,000. So, when you do the math on that, just straight math on that, that's funding, between 3 and 6 years of retirement, and then, you're out of money. So I think in a lot of ways, the traditional budgeting methods have led to that result for people. So getting strong with your cash flow and saving 20% of your income each year. And then the third thing is the investment management piece, is, be on top of how your money's managed. Are you getting fairly compensated for the amount of risk that you're taking? I see portfolios all the time. Folks come in to see me, and some of these portfolios are, invested in really, really risky stuff, and they really have no idea. And so a lot of my work is to listen to them up front, find out, get them to tell me what they want their lives to look like, and then see, are your financial decisions on a day in, day out basis in alignment with that? And if they're not, is to kind of coach them along and help bring those things into alignment. Because when we can do that, then they can have a more calm and balanced life. So those are the three things: is know where you are with your protection. Cash flow is the dominant determinant. And then on the investment piece, are you getting compensated for the amount of risk that you're taking?
Yeah, man, that's great advice for sure. And I actually just seen this was last week. I seen something flash across my phone in the news feed, and it said the average American has less than $2,000 in a savings account.
Yeah, it's true.
That's pretty sad, man. I mean,
It
geez,
is. Yeah,
terrible.
and it is terrible. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, The One Number Budget, is to try and put a dent in that problem. I find that traditional budgeting methods fail for a number of reasons, but the main one is that they're complicated. You've got 30 to 40 different things that you have to track every single month. And so that's a lot of work. And then out of those 30 to 40, I mean, as I'm guessing, you tell me if I'm right here, but no month looks like last month or the next month. There's always something that's off. And when you're trying to track 30 to 40 budget items that you've made perfect, you got the perfect budget hanging on your refrigerator, you put a lot of work into it, and you're off on 10 of them, it just makes you feel like a failure. And people, if they feel like a failure, they'll usually, they might hang in there for a month or two, but eventually they're just going to quit because it's just not fit for them. So the book that I wrote around the one number budget was to give people another option of how to simplify your cash flow decisions, how to do it with a lifetime perspective, so that you'll actually do it and you do it consistently.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the key, right? And I think people just aren't realistic from the beginning, right? So with what a budget looks like, because it's not just a budget, it's also, managing isn't even the word. People are just terrible about, just knowing what an asset is, right?
Yeah.
What an asset, what debt is, what's the difference between regular debt and strategic debt, how to leverage them differently. So, this isn't the stuff they teach in the school systems. And that's part of the problem, right? Is it'd be great if kids could come up through school and understand some of this stuff, coming into life a little better, but we all know everybody can't be a business owner, so they don't teach that, which that's true. I mean, there's some truth in that. They raise us up in life in school to be employees. I mean, we got to have employees too, right? I mean, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. But it would be so refreshing. And I know there's schools that do it, but if we could literally teach people how to not just manage money, but invest money, where to put money, how to move it around, what's a debt, what's an asset, all these things, so they know this stuff. And then when you do put a number on there, it makes sense, right? And I'm not really a huge fan of budgets. We all have to have them,
right?
But I like fluid budgets. But some of that's because I'm a business owner, right? And budgets are always fluxing all the time, right? Because your budget this month might be different next month, and it has to, and that makes it complicated, I think, sometimes for a lot of your average American to try to balance some of that.
Right. You raise a great point. Like most entrepreneurs and business owners, if they saw the budget spreadsheet that I, put forth in the book, probably not going to use it too much from like a month to month standpoint. It's really more designed for employees. But a lot of what I borrow from, let me first start with this. Like, one of the things that I don't like about traditional budgets is it focuses on just a month, and after a while, it just kind of trains the person to that, as long as I got more money than month, then I'm all set. I'm doing good, but it doesn't really lend itself well to a lifetime perspective.
Right.
And if you have a certain amount that's allocated in your monthly budget that's going towards long-term, retirement savings, if you get pressed that month, if you have an unplanned expense that month, where are you stealing from? Like how are you going to make the numbers work for the month? And typically you're going to steal from the retirement bucket. You can't steal from the mortgage company because they're going to take your house.
Right.
You can't steal from any of those other categories. So you're going to steal from the retirement bucket. And, what you're really doing in that instance is you're stealing from your future self. So the perspective that I share with clients and I share in the book is if, from a lifetime perspective, the importance of getting the cash flow management piece right is if you think of a 90-year life and you divide that into thirds, and you've got a first 30 that's, your parents basically pay for most of that. So I don't really spend a lot of time talking about the first 30. Then you've got the middle 30. That's the financial engine. That's where you're earning your money during your prime working years. And then you've got the final 30, which is, retirement. So when you think about it, you've got 60 years of living that need to be funded out of 30 years of working.
Yeah.
And that puts tremendous pressure on those 30 years. But when you're in the fight, it's tough to remember that because you're staring your kids in the face and they're like, yeah, we want to be on the soccer team and thought we were going to go to Disney this year. And, I'm hoping to go to college. There's a lot of things riding on those 30 years, but just, repeat what I said, you gotta fund 60 years of living out of 30 years of earning.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at that. I bet you that'll bring a little different perspective to some of the people that are listening.
I hope so.
To look at it that way, but because it's almost, and hard work doesn't always equate to more money and all that kind of stuff either. But it's about knowing how to properly feed that beast to when, you are 65. Now
Right.
You're not working until you're 80. I know lots of people that have ended up that way, and it's really sad.
And I would even say those are the lucky ones. That working beyond 65 was possible.
Sure.
There was an article, I reference it in the book, 2018 article that it was a study done on folks, the 50 plus. And what the article found was if you're over the age of 50, there is a 56% chance that you will lose your job due to no fault of your own. That's not the scary statistic. The scary statistic came after that, which was only 1 in 10 will replace that income. They'll find a job that will replace the income.
Oh, wow.
So when you made the comment about, growing your income, and like one of the things I'm encouraging clients and anybody that'll listen really is you've got to devote time every single year to making yourself better. When in the 70s and 80s, there was kind of lifetime employment. The world's changed. And you just have to make sure that when they're making when the corporations, like we're seeing in the news, people are getting laid off. When those decisions are being made, make sure that they're like, well, John, he's up at the top. Like there's 5 people in that department. John's not going anywhere. So, we just have to make a decision about, one of these folks. But it's certainly not going to be John. Just make sure that's you.
Yeah, right. For sure. Well, outlook. What's the outlook for 2023 in your opinion? Are we going up or are we going in the shitter?
So I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Well, I mean, it's funny. I talk to people a lot, as you can imagine, and I say that just as I said it to you, and clients will look across the table. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know." But seriously, what's going to happen? Like nobody knows.
Rub your crystal ball and see what happens.
Well, I mean, if I knew that, I wouldn't have published a book, and I'd be, sitting in the Bahamas, I guess. But
sure.
But what I encourage people to do is focus on what you can control. Like that advice on the tail end of the 50 plus discussion. that's really your best bet, is just make yourself better every single year. And then you've done everything that you can do to improve your situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All great tips and great advice. How do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Sure. So folks that want to contact me, the website, cranefinancial.com, and you can find me through the contact page there and read about me. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the budgeting book, there's a website for the book, onenumberbudget.com. You can download the first chapter for free. If you just want to download the spreadsheet so you can play around with the budgeting spreadsheet, if you go to onenumberbudget.com/worksheet, you'll be able to download it there.
Cool. Very awesome. Well, hey,
thank you.
Great conversation. Great points today. I hope everybody really oozed that in the brain. And I always like to kind of close out the show with the $1 million question is,
okay.
If John could have had anybody here, if you could have anybody here with you today, dead or alive, any point in time, doesn't matter, either to be involved in the conversation, and it might be somebody that you would have because of the conversation we had. Who would have you loved to have had here and why?
Sure. So you, this conversation kind of our entire conversation today kind of sparked something in me when you're asking me about, where the entrepreneurial roots of my journey. Sure. So my answer to your question is my great-grandfather, Walter. My family's history going back to the early 1800s, they were business owners in Brooklyn, New York. They owned a shipyard, and it was a big family. And my great-grandfather, Walter, he was the third oldest. And so two of his older brothers ran the shipyard and then subsequently passed, and then, order of succession. So my great-grandfather, Walter, was really responsible for running that business for the majority of his adult life, and ended up really having to take care of all of his brothers and sisters and their families. And I think about him a lot, especially when I'm going through it, a challenge, and I'm I wonder what his life must have been like, because he had a lot of irons in the fire. So it would have been great to have him on the call today, just to hear his perspective and to hear what it was like for him. Because obviously a much different time, but that's who I would say.
Yeah, that's a great choice for sure. I know my grandpa, those generations were definitely a little more rougher around the edges, and didn't pull punches really so much. And I remember many times my grandpa, and it literally went down generations to my dad, you got to be a raging capitalist. And I mean, that's something that's always stuck with me, right? I mean, if you want your situation to be different, you have to change your situation, right? So change your situation and do something that makes the situation different. Don't just be satisfied with unsatisfaction, right? So I think that's really key for sure. But well, hey, it was great having you on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We all have the same 168 every week, so and you took the time to spend 31 here with us today, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right. Cheers.
This podcast is intended for general public use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities, LLC, and your financial representative are not undertaking to provide investment advice or make a recommendation for a specific individual or situation, or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity. Strategic Advisor Board Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Crane Financial, and opinions stated are their own. John W. Crane, Registered Representative and Financial Advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, Pass. Office of Jurisdiction, 11350 McCormick Road, Executive Plaza 3, Suite 202, Hunt Valley, Maryland, 21031. Telephone number 667 318-0801. Securities, products, and advisory services offered through PASS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PASS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Crane Financial, LLC is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PASS or Guardian. California license number 0G79065. Compliance number 2023149930. Expiration March 2024.
Thanks for listening to War Room Moments with your host, Jason Miller. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.